Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. And on the podcast, we talk about all things to increase muscle performance, improve body composition, all within a flexible approach without destroying your health in the process. Today, we've got a great guest, Dr. Chester Soko, and we talked all about muscle hypertrophy, how to get bigger muscles you should be training for in the gym if hypertrophy is your goal. You want to look better on the beach, better body composition, regards to nutrient timing. Should you be having more protein and carbohydrates around your training sessions or possibly even during? A little bit about muscle damage. Should you really go into the gym and just brutalize your tissue so much so that you have a ton of muscle soreness? Is that really better for hypertrophy? And then also we chatted about the concept of metabolic flexibility, which is of course one of my favorites. And if you enjoyed this podcast, I also recorded 3 questions for Dr. Soko that I'm going to release later on. I don't know exactly what the name of the new product will be, but we asked him specifically about best chest exercise, calf development, and one other question. So hop on to the newsletter, and as soon as I have a name for the new program, been working on it in the background for about the past 6 months or so. Hopefully I'll have it out in the next couple months. I've just got some other projects that have deadlines before that. But we'll have those 3 questions there for you. So you get on the newsletter, just go to miketnelson.com, the main page. You can hop on to the daily newsletter there for free. So that is our sponsor, I guess you could say, so far of the podcast, since, it's just me. And make sure to check out Dr. Soko on the Instagram. It's just Dr_SOKO. Lots of really great information there. And as of this recording, he's getting close to 10,000 followers. So go give him some love. It'd be awesome to get him over 10,000 followers, which is a big deal for Instagram. You can do other cool stuff on there then too. Check out this podcast with Dr. Chester Soko. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and listening here today with Dr. Chester. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the program, and congratulations to finishing your PhD, which I think happened officially relatively recent, correct?
Yeah, about a month ago, I defended.
Nice. And Dr. Arnsley wasn't too hard on you for your defense?
No, he was pretty good. He was pretty lenient. I'm starting a postdoc under Dr. Ormsby as well. So we're going to have a long.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Cool. Are you studying something similar in your postdoc or something different?
A little bit different. I'm still working with females. My dissertation was in the impact of binge drinking and resistance training on young adult females. And now we're going to focus more so on fat metabolism in postmenopausal women. So we're going to look at essentially what is more effective to improve markers of health and improve fat metabolism. Is it endurance training, your aerobic activity, your cardio, or is it resistance training? And we want to see after 12 weeks of either endurance training or resistance training, what measures are affected and maybe which is the better choice. If you're going to allot 3 days a week for exercise, what should you do to get the maximum benefit and return for your time investment?
And by benefit there, are you looking at body comp? Or are you just looking at purely fat oxidation, all the above?
A whole host of measures: insulin sensitivity, fat metabolism, body composition. We have so many measures in this R1 that we're going to be looking at. And I'm tasked with the applied portion. So getting the recruiting and the women to exercise.
Awesome. I think I talked to Dr. Ormsby about that. He said he just got some R1 funding and he was telling me the amount of catheters and probes and shit they would have stuck into people, which sounds pretty awesome for geeks like us.
Yes, it is intense. One of the days, the measurement days, is about 8 hours of testing. Yeah, so we have some great participants who are going to go through that fun stuff.
Are they doing an insulin clamp as part of that too? Or are they just,
Yes.
That's what I thought he said too. So for listeners who are listening going, what the hell are any of these people talking about? So an insulin clamp in layman's terms is you stuff an IV in one arm, stuff an IV in the other arm, and then you just whack a shitload of glucose and insulin at the same time. So you're elevating everything up. A lot of times they'll do it as what's called a glycemic clamp. They'll just leave glucose as quote unquote clamped, meaning we're trying to keep that the same level. And they'll use that as a marker for, it's been argued if it's useful or not useful because it's so super physiologic. But to me, it's fascinating just to be a benchtop test of what is the extreme end of someone's metabolism without having to do exercise, I guess is how I think about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the results. And personally, I'm rooting for resistance training to be a little
Yeah.
bit effective. Yeah, just because of my meathead background, my meathead bias. So we'll see at the end of the 12 weeks, though.
Yeah. We all saw how speedy you were to run up at the ISSN and get your award. So you're definitely more on the resistance power end of the spectrum for sure.
Yeah, I think I did leg day or something previous to that. So walk about 5 miles per hour.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you'll have to be back on once you get more into that study because I think that's definitely an area. I know I get a lot of questions. I've attempted to poke around a little bit at the literature, which I don't know. It's all across the board right now, and it's cool to see more studies actually being done on female physiology. I think we'll find a lot of stuff is similar, and obviously we're going to find a lot of stuff is going to be different too. And then right now, there's just a general kind of lack of data in that area, so it'll be fascinating.
I agree. And especially it's important when we do this research to highlight the distinct populations and the hormones, your menopausal, your perimenopausal, and your postmenopausal, excuse me, premenopausal, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal, because those are three unique populations that each one needs their own special attention.
Yeah, my hypothesis, which I don't have any data to back this up, is that my guess is post-menopausal women will be similar to male physiology, but pre and peri might be different. And then we can split hairs on, is it different enough to dedicate, like you've probably seen training for wherever particular cycle you're in. I haven't been overly impressed by that data, but there's just not much of it. I tried doing it years ago with a few female clients, and in all honesty, in practice, it was a freaking disaster. Because like every email was about like their cycle and this, and I'm like looking, going, "Yo, you're like at 80 grams of protein today. Let's maybe go back and just not drop all of the basics." And I get it, like you get interested in something, and then you become hyper focused on that, and then other stuff falls by the wayside. So it'll be super interesting. I don't know if you have any bias or hypothesis in that area yet.
Not particularly, but I do agree with you in the fact that as researchers, I think we over science some of our athletes. We over science the coaching.
Definitely.
And I think that it's best to let the athlete auto regulate. And personally, when I coach or when I instruct people, I don't manipulate training or nutrition too much based on the cycle really at all. And I just go with what the athlete is feeling and the communication between that. And typically it's not different throughout the cycle.
Yeah, and I have some stuff where females are like, will monitor scale weight daily, and they're like, "Oh, this part of the cycle, I know I usually go up 2 or 3 pounds," which is good to know because at that point you're like, "Oh, your compliance is good, exercise is good, heart rate variability is good." And I know that happened during this week, and I know the scale went up 2 pounds. I'm not going to freak out and be like, "Oh my god, let's crash your calories because you're not losing fat because you're just using scale weight." So I think a lot of those things are useful to know, but like you said, I've talked to even a lot more advanced coaches, and I can't say I found one yet that has a female athlete dialed into a NatSAS where like their schedule is going to be useful in terms of predicting and setting up different training and different nutrition ahead of time versus just reacting to whatever is going on with them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that at any point in the cycle, if you do too much volume, you're still going to be susceptible to overtraining. So I think that there's just larger variables that are going to dictate how you're feeling: training volume, nutrition intake, sleep quantity, sleep quality. I think those are the variables that you have to more so go off of and auto regulate based from rather than a specific point in the cycle. I just think those are going to be larger factors that are going to dictate your mood, your performance, and ultimately your results.
Yeah. And as dudes, we're not saying that this isn't a thing and it shouldn't be researched at all. You're actually doing research on it. I think it just begs the question of, we may find something, or you may find something in your study in the future that shows it's statistically significant, meaning that, oh yeah, this is like a true effect. But then the next question is, what is the effect size of that? If you employ enough people in a study and you have enough money, you can find some pretty tiny effect sizes. And does that, like you said, negate a whole bunch of other stuff? Probably not. We have a whole bunch of other things, overload, nutrition, sleep, that are going to be much, much higher effect sizes at the same time. So I think sometimes when things are new and exciting, and I'm 100% guilty of this at times, I get a little bit too excited about stuff, and then I try to shoehorn it into all my programs. And the reality was, yeah, maybe only 2 people maybe needed that, or maybe didn't even need it at all.
Yeah, I agree. There's just so many variables that do influence. And I do think it's a piece of the pie, but I think we definitely have established, researched larger pieces of the pie, training volume, sleep, elements like that.
And on a side note, do you measure recovery in any of your athletes? Do you look at like performance? Do you use RPE? Do you use heart rate variability? How do you, I guess, gauge the difference between one athlete versus another? One thing I've noticed, and have probably noticed more the longer I've been working with clients, even just something as simple as volume tolerance, which we could argue about what is the exact definition of that. But pretty much anyone who's worked with athletes or even high level clients have found that on paper, wow, this client should handle a lot of volume, and they just, I don't know, they just don't do as well. Or other clients I found, like, they can handle just a crap ton of volume. And oddly enough, the client I've had in the past who has the record for at least the system I use for volume was Erin Elliott. She was up to doing 7 sets a week of exercise. And I was having her send me videos of like her form at the end. And it was pretty damn good. So it wasn't like the quality was just eroding. So I thought that was interesting if you're looking at even male and female physiology, that she was doing really good on volume and doing twice as much as some other guys. Granted, she's a very high level experienced competitor too, have been doing it for many years also. But just curious how you would try to figure that out, and what system do you use for that?
I'm old school with it. I like assessing muscle damage through recovery, through performance recovery, and particularly of strength recovery. I am a fan of keeping reps in reserve. I typically don't take the final. First of all, I specialize more so in hypertrophy training and aesthetics. That's my general background. But I definitely am a fan of keeping reps in reserve. I typically don't take a set or recommend taking a set to true muscular failure unless it's the last set of training a specific muscle group. And then in general, the strength recovery. Are you on point with your diet? Are you getting at least energy balance? Are you sleeping enough? And if those things are too pretty good, then the strength should be progressing. And I think if you have a plateau for longer than 2 weeks, or you're just not getting over a hump, then we could have too high a volume and might need to restrict for that specific muscle group. I also think each muscle group is distinct and individual. I think the amount of volume you can do on biceps and triceps is a little different, and that's different than quads. And I also think you need to consider the CNS element, the central nervous system, and how demanding each of the exercises are. A set of squats and a set of bicep curls, they're not comparable on the CNS, on the central nervous system, on the stress. So you also, in factoring in the strength, you need to consider just talk to your athletes and how are they doing from a mental side of things. Are they still enthusiastic to train, still excited to train? I think combining those hard objective strength outcomes with some of the more subjective outcomes, I think that's sort of my approach to tracking an athlete, and to see if the progressive overload is working and if they're getting too much or if they're getting not enough.
Yeah, I like that because even with just a handful of physique athletes I've worked with or currently work with, I think the biggest paradigm shift for some of them was that, like, oh, you're actually really tracking strength. I'm like, yeah. And like, but my goal is like hypertrophy. I'm like, yeah. Because at some point, if you're in a caloric surplus, your recovery is not absolutely just dog crap, and you're getting stronger, even if you're a natural athlete, at some point you almost have to get bigger. You can't infinitely get stronger without adding some size. And again, I think there's a huge amount of variability in that and the type of training you do and a whole bunch of other factors. But like you said, on the things we can measure like week to week, I think you'd be even hard pressed if we jammed you in an MRI like 1 week and 3 weeks later to even see any difference. Maybe muscle biopsy, maybe, but then how does that translate to overall size in your bicep? Ooh, the fiber got a little bigger, but I don't know, like, what does that mean? So I think tracking strength is an underutilized approach, even for hypertrophy.
Oh, I think that's probably one of my biggest mistakes, is not tracking strength when I was younger and not really caring about performance, because I want to look good, but I don't really care about performance or getting strong. I don't really want to be the strongest one in the gym. But I think strength is more so an assessment and a reflection of muscle damage. Your strength should be increasing. And if it is not, you're eating at least energy balance and getting your sleep in. If your strength is not increasing, I think you're overtrained. You're doing too much damage. And muscles grow best when damage is lower. The protein you eat is going to go towards adding new mass rather than repairing your old damaged mass. So tracking strength, making sure that is going up mildly quickly, that's an indicative of low muscle damage. And low muscle damage is going to be associated with your best hypertrophic outcomes. So I think the strength measures need to be tracked. You need to record your workouts, a logbook. I'm coming out with an app. You can record workouts and track your progress in the app. But all athletes, I think, should hyper focus on their performance, even the physique athletes. And I think that even if you don't care about being the strongest person in the gym, it's just going to be a reflection of your program. Is it working? Are you progressing your overload? Are you doing too much? Are you doing too little? And those are the key things that again, all athletes need to know about.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. We're preaching to the choir here. And even if you look at top natural athletes or top enhanced bodybuilders, whatever population you pick, almost all those guys and gals are like stupid strong. Are they pound for pound as strong as an Olympic weightlifter for force production? No. Are they as strong as a power lifter? No. But compared to most people, I can't think of almost any exceptions. And there's a huge range within that. I think it was even Jay Cutler was on a video, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. It's probably an old video. This is how much I spend time watching some of this stuff. But it's fascinating to listen to because he's like, yeah, I don't use bench press much anymore. I don't think it's that great of a mass developer. And everyone's like, oh, heresy. But then later in the video, you realize that I think he was benching like 405 for reps in high school. You're like, yeah, for you at that level, it probably isn't.
Yeah.
But for most people, like myself, when I started and got crushed by an empty bar in high school, like it's probably, if it's done effectively, might be useful.
Yeah, and I think I'm a fan of power building. I think all the greatest,
Hmm.
most massive physiques were built with a good strength foundation. Ronnie Coleman in his deadlifts, Arnold Schwarzenegger in his bench press, Tom Platz in his squats. This is the biggest chest, the biggest back, and the biggest legs. And I don't think it's a mistake or an accident or coincidence that they're very strong at these lifts. So I think a good strength foundation, it's pretty easy to track a few compound exercises, strengthen those in particular, your deadlifts, your bench press, your squats, your hack squats, your shoulder press. Definitely track strength in those measures. And I think it won't be a coincidence if your strength dramatically increases in those lifts and your muscle hypertrophy in those specific muscles gets a lot bigger.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I talked to Kyle Dobbs about this on a podcast. So we'll try to link to that. There's a time and a place to do, if your only goal is physique and hypertrophy, doing highly advanced isolation exercises, lat pull down, supinating as you pull it with left hand against a bench, split stance, God knows, whatever. Yeah, there's definitely a time and a place for that too. But I agree with you that, yeah, if you can't do a fair amount of pull-ups or chin-ups, we can argue if that's the best lat developer or not, or bent over rows or deadlifts or things where it may not be the main exercise, even farmer's walks, depending on your risk tolerance of injury. If you get really good at those movements, you're going to be able to do isolation work relatively easy, or you can add it on later. And I think you'll get a lot of benefit from it. It's the old thing where, and I made this mistake early on, did just mostly leg press for lower body. And the first time I ever went to squat, I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was somewhat strong in the leg press. I was never ridiculously strong by any means. And I felt like I'd never used my legs in my life. Where you take someone who can squat a decent amount of weight and you put them on a leg press within a couple of sessions, they're doing pretty good. So I think those big kind of compound exercises have a high amount of transfer to isolation, and some of the isolation stuff doesn't necessarily transfer back to the bigger compound lifts.
I agree 1,000%. And I think you're going to get so much more return on your investment doing your basic compound lifts. I think also, if we just kind of look at the physiques throughout time, 70s, 80s, 90s, nowadays, a lot of people would argue that the physiques back then are better than the physiques now. And what were they doing back then? They were doing the basics. Before you had to invent new exercises to entertain people on social media, you were just doing your basic bent over rows, deadlifts, pull ups, chin ups. that was your bread and butter and your meat and potatoes. Nowadays, I feel like you want to tune in, you want to be entertained on social media. So you're not going to keep tuning in if somebody is doing a deadlift with 600 pounds this week and 605 pounds the next week, and then 610 pounds the following week. You're just going to be tuned out. So you want to see new things, new exercises. And I think the return on your investment from those is not going to be as good. And once again, I think we see that throughout the evidence of time, and that the physiques nowadays, they're just, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, they're not as good as literally the classic, the golden era, the 90s bodybuilders, just the more aesthetic physiques, where I think you did have that higher emphasis on the basics.
Yeah. To me, the video I still remember the most, if I pick, so I have in my head, I'd segregate eras between like 50s to 70s ish, maybe early 80s, 80s and beyond, and like newer stuff. And then pre 1952, Diana Ball was what, 1952, 1954. So you've got just different methods and chemical enhancement versus not. But at least in the late 80s and 90s, I remember when Zadorian did was the European Grand Prix, I think. The old kind of just shitty video of him walking out on stage and doing like his back poses. And I was like, what the holy hell is that?
Yeah.
That was like the first time I was like just blown away with something that you hadn't really seen that level before at that point. And some people may argue, yeah, maybe it's not even nearly matched by current day either.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And I think, how did Dorian get beat was Ronnie. And what was Ronnie doing? He was deadlifting, he was doing bent over rows, he was V-bar rowing, he was still doing the basics.
Yeah.
And eventually, I just feel like social media has created a need to invent new exercise. And I honestly think some of those basics that we just alluded to, they're really hard. The
Yeah.
deadlifts, the bent over rows, the V-bar rows and deadlifts, that is demanding. I think it's so much easier if you do ice over isolation, one arm overhead, supinate this, supinate that, invent new cable pull. It's just easier to do some of these newly invented exercises rather than kind of bang on those old school V-bar rows, deadlifts. And I think at some point people want to be entertained, and they also want maybe a shortcut or the easy way out from going over sort of those really hard bent over barbell rows, which are not a lot of fun. Pull-ups, not a lot of fun compared to some of these fancy gadget exercises. And I just, once again, you see it in the quality of the physiques. You see who's putting the work in, and you see who maybe wants the entertainment or the easy way out and not grind for those results.
Anyone who's done exercise at all, I think there's a time and a place for cable stuff, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
the sensation of it is just completely different. You can't really torch yourself systemically with a cable. I just don't think it's possible. Like
Yeah,
you
you need,
compare any cable exercise to like a set of 20 for trap bar deadlifts. It's like you're in two different universes at that point.
I agree 100%. Your foundation has to be established. And a lot of people, they look at the social media and they see these really high level people. Maybe we talked about just Jay Cutler in that previous example. Oh, I don't think bench press is a good mass developer. Look at your foundation.
Yeah.
You mentioned 405 for reps in your teens.
Yeah.
That's your foundation. That's what allowed you to play around with some of the other stuff and still have that results. You had that base in the basics, that the fundamental structure rooted in the basics. And that's what I think allowed maybe this freedom. And also, I think when you look at the social media elites, the genetic monsters, their margin for error is huge. They will respond to so many different elements. Whereas if you're not hyper responsive resistance training, it's much more challenging. And I also think that emphasizes the need for, if you don't respond as well, to track your strength, track how you're feeling, because those are going to be the key variables to determine if muscle damage is high or low, if you're doing too much, too little. Your attention to details, in particular, your strength variables, some of your objective and subjective outcome measures, you just got to have that heightened focus. And again, those genetic elites, they just more leeway for error, more freedom to do essentially what they want in terms of workouts, in terms of recovery, in terms of tracking, in terms of all the details that maybe they don't have to perfect like you do.
Yeah. And I think that's easy to forget that you're looking at the elite of the elite. And some of them obviously work harder than others. We're not taking away from any of the work that's involved to get there. But if you don't have the same genetics or even supplements, etc., like you can't expect that what they're doing once they're at the top 5%, 1%, 0.005% to work for you when you're starting either. Those are two completely different endpoints. And I remember a buddy, I'll remain nameless, but he used to train it back in the day at the same gym that Paul Dillette trained at.
Yeah.
And he would say that he's like, he was like, in his opinion, was like one of the biggest genetic freaks he ever saw because he was at the same gym he was at when he prepped for his Olympia debuts and everything. He's like, yeah, he come in, he was literally doing press downs with 40 pounds. So like, how does this even register? Like he wasn't really hardly any full range of motion. He's like, his loads weren't even that heavy. And yet he looked like that. He's like, I don't understand anything anymore.
Yeah. I think a great way to look at some of these people who are at the top echelon, try to find pictures when they were teenagers or in their super
Yes.
young 20s, when they were potentially natural or barely into the enhanced field. And you'll see that even as teenagers or in their young 20s, they were just units. They look like dudes
Yeah.
in their 30s who have been on steroids for a decade. Like they're just incredible, responsive beasts. So before you take advice for people listening, from anyone on social media, try to find what they looked like before famous and how you know them now. And I bet you'll still find, I know there's a picture of Chris Bumstead when he was natural, and
Yeah.
he still looks like a 30-year-old, probably could have an IFBB pro card in men's physique in his teens. Like it was just nuts how elite these guys are and how the genetics show themselves at such a young level.
Yeah, and people forget Ronnie Coleman did probably his first show natural. Kai Green was a natural competitor for a long time with an extremely impressive physique, nowhere near to what he was later, but still extremely impressive. I remember the picture of Lee Priest when he was 18. I guess he had been training for 4 years at that point. And you're like, what the hell? Could just walk on stage and probably do pretty damn good. And obviously he did better after that. I remember him in a video just bitching about all the muscle magazines are like, yeah, we need another arm training from you. And I can't do an Australian accent, but, and I've been doing the same goddamn thing for 20 years. He's like, I've always had good arms. He's like, I don't really train him that hard at all, but he just had freaky development. Of course, so everyone goes, what did you do for that? And he's like, I didn't really do a whole lot.
Yeah.
He's like, that's not the answer they want to hear.
Yeah, Tom Platz had something similar. He's don't ask me how I grew my legs and calves. I was just squats, hard work, leg extensions, but ask me how I grew my arms. Ask
Yes.
me the muscles I struggled with. And I think that's another good space when you're looking for advice. Don't ask the people who've had the easiest road. Ask the people who've had to learn through trial and error, through reading the science. I feel like that's a great way to expand your reach. I think that sort of a new concept going to stretch mediated hypertrophy.
Mm.
And me personally, I struggle tremendously with my arm growth, but I've seen more arm growth doing stretch mediated hypertrophy exercises that put my muscles in a more lengthened position, lower muscle damage, so lower volume. Things that I've had to adapt and not only just read the literature, but also have that experiential knowledge that I think is very important to muscle growth. So blending those two things and finding a coach or someone who's giving advice who's just not had the easiest road, I think that is going to be advantageous if you're looking for quality advice and you probably have similar shoes if you might not have had the easiest road to develop a particular muscle group.
Yeah, and also ask coaches and trainers, like, who have they worked with and what have they done for them? And so the analogy, I agree 100% with what you're saying, is Bill Belichick is probably arguably one of the best NFL coaches. But if you saw him on the street, you're like, huh, football coach? Like, and you don't know anything about the sport because to coach it at a high level is completely different than he's not going to run out in the field and try to catch a pass. Obviously, you want some experience, you want some background, but at the end of the day, you want to be more interested in who have they coached, like you said, where did they start from, where did they get to, is going to be a better indicator than, ooh, wow, they look good naked, they must be a good coach.
Yeah, I agree. We talk about the pyramid of evidence. We got our peer reviewed, we got our randomized control trials, we got our meta analyses, and above everything, there's looking good shirtless on Instagram.
Yeah.
The ultimate hierarchy. But yeah, I think that's super important. Like somebody has to be involved in the research. And also when you do look for people, you look for information, are they involved in the research? And then also maybe what are their potential biases? I think that a lot of people do have biases and they don't want to be proven wrong, or maybe they're trying to sell you something. I know glute activation was a tremendous tool that people can use to sell glute bands and things like that. So where are the potential biases? Not just are you looking at the research, but are you interpreting the research through a clear lens? and then sort of giving that information back without slanting it a particular direction to try to get people to buy something that maybe they don't need.
Yeah, and that's even hard now because, and I'm a huge fan of science education on Instagram, whatever method you want to use. I think that's great. But I think there's a little bit of a trend where consumers are like, oh, this person has some sort of credential, whatever it is. Ooh, they said a mechanism. Oh, I must need this thing then. It's almost like everybody's looking for the shortcut. And it's like if you mention any mechanism, like my favorite one is anabolic fasting. Oh, this must be a great program. He's using anabolic fasting. I'm like, those words don't even make sense together.
Yeah.
But oh, it has a mechanism. Oh, it's mTOR and AMPK. Oh, cool. Yeah, that must be real. Like, sometimes it is, right? And there's obviously very legit things to fasting. There's legit things to anabolic processes, but there seems to be a mashup where we just want to throw out a mechanism, and then all of a sudden everyone's, oh, this is the next thing.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, whoever you are getting that advice from, make sure you can understand it. Make sure they're explaining it so a third grader can understand it. And that's not to insult anyone's
Yeah,
intelligence,
yeah.
but just make sure it is so basic, so fundamental, and you could grasp it and almost explain it to somebody else. Even if science isn't your forte or research isn't your forte, you should be able to understand it well enough to potentially explain it to somebody else. And if somebody can't teach you that, if they're throwing huge words at you to sound essentially overly sophisticated and overcomplicate something simple, I think that maybe that might be a sign that they could have some potential bias, or maybe they don't know what they're talking about themselves if they just can't simplify extremely basic or what should be basic topics.
Yeah. And within that, you always want to ask, what is the context? Like, are you talking about trying to get an elite athlete to their best 100-meter time in a sprint, or a physique athlete trying to add half a pound of muscle to their chest or something? Or Bob, whose butt looks like a couch cushion and he just needs to start walking around the block. And I think the context just gets dropped all the time. And that's where I see a lot of the comments and arguments and all that stuff come in. Even something as simple as, are you talking about healthy people? Or are you talking about like frank pathologies, or where like shit's all screwed up? Right. Those my elite level physique humans compared to a guy who was a metabolic train wreck are almost two completely different worlds again. And some stuff that works for one is like the complete opposite for someone else. It's like if you're a borderline type 2 diabetic, you don't move at all, your sleep's a disaster, you eat 40 grams of protein a day, then yeah, 400 grams of carbohydrates probably not going to be a good idea for you. But if you're training hard and you're lifting, I've got several athletes that are well over 400 grams of carbs a day and they still have abs.
Yeah.
So people want to go, oh, it's the carbs that are bad. It's like, no, what are you talking about? What population here?
Yeah, I think population and research is tremendously important. And I think that our job as practitioners is to blend PubMed and practicality, and also make sure our client, they know which population we're talking about. For example, you use the example of carbohydrates. I always teach sort of a sugar example. Is sugar bad? If somebody is insulin resistant, sugar is definitely not good. But if somebody is an athlete expending an incredible amount of energy, sugar, especially intra-workout carbohydrates, that can be fantastic. That can improve performance. That can make your life easier. So the population that is discussed in research should be highlighted by the practitioner giving advice, because it makes a huge, incredible difference.
Yeah, I remember John Brardy saying this years ago, talking about context. And he's like, people ask me all the time, peanut M&Ms, are they good or bad? He's, if I'm stranded on a desert island and the only thing I have is peanut M&Ms, he's like, that's pretty good. He's like, if I'm at home or I have other options, he's like, peanut M&Ms probably not at the top of the list.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So let's talk a little bit about nutrient timing. You mentioned carbohydrates during training. What is your general thoughts on it? I've gone back and forth on this topic so many times. And for people who've been around the industry long enough, we probably remember like the nutrient timing book, which was John Ivey's stuff. And I remember reading that and going, wow, this is amazing. And then 5 years later, rereading it again, going, wait a minute, these aren't strength training athletes. These were mostly endurance studies once I went back to formally study that area. And then fast forward, there was some negative feedback against that. There's been a handful of nutrient timing studies done. Paul Cribb did one of the early ones. Hoffman's done one. There's probably 4, 5, 6 that have looked at exclusively nutrient timing and more of a lifting population. You might have more studies in that now. But my general thought is, you can have carbohydrates and protein before lifting. Great. Have some after. Cool. I don't think you need to time it down to the gnat's ass again, but it just seems like the industry wants to say nutrient time is like the best thing ever, or, oh, it's worthless. What are you doing having a protein shake after training, you dumb idiot? Haven't you read anything on PubMed?
Yeah.
It
I
just
definitely
seems like
think
it wants to go one direction or the other all the time.
I definitely think, yeah, your pre-workout and your post-workout protein and carbohydrates are very important. And then I'll touch on intra-workout carbohydrates
Yeah.
for lifters. I think it depends, and research is all over the place on this.
Yep.
First of all, here's where we talked about our population makes a difference. If you're untrained, you're not going to be pushing max performance regardless if you have carbohydrates or not. You're just getting used to your body. And if you have an extra 10 grams of glucose, that's not going to allow you to dig any deeper and push further than you otherwise would have been able to push, because you're not really sure how far you can push in general because you're just like a puppy. You're getting used to using your body. So I think any intra workout carb study, an untrained population or a recreationally trained population, won't really have any benefit. If you are an elite resistance trained athlete, or you're looking to become elite, you're looking for that edge, then I think that intra workout carbohydrates can have an incredible advantage. And I'm not talking about like spare muscle glycogen or spare liver glycogen or anything like that. I think the mechanism is activating reward centers in the brain. And that has proven that it can potentially increase your high quality volume. You can dig a little deeper. You can improve your performance. So I think if you are looking to take the next step and you already know you're training hard, you already know you're pushing outside of your comfort zone, I think intra workout carbohydrates can be fantastic, especially if your workouts are lasting more than an hour, or especially if you use long rest intervals, which I recommend. I think sometimes the intra workout carbohydrates just kind of help you keep you focused and alert, whereas your mind can maybe drift a little bit. And I think the body's going to go where the mind takes it. So keeping your mind engaged, keeping glucose, keeping reward centers activated in the brain, that can translate to good performance benefits if you're at the top of the game and pushing close to or outside of your comfort zone.
And do you think some of the CNS potential stuff is that from some of the mouth rinse studies that have looked at it, where a lot of times this is higher endurance performance, but they've given people like a carbohydrate drink, but don't swallow it, then spit it out. And then they've tried to replicate that with like sugar-free drinks and trying to look at, okay, the taste sensations, like you mentioned. Oh, carbohydrates are coming in. Then the brain goes, ooh, carbohydrates, yay. Maybe we increase performance, but the actual substrate wasn't there, doesn't go through digestion. So it's a way of trying to tease out mechanistically what might be going on.
Yeah, I agree. Personally, just I'm old school practical side of things. If you're gonna drink a Gator, I do a Gatorade with a water. So I carry around two separate drinks when I train. I just swallow it because I feel like that would be a little bit weird if I spit my Gatorade
Yeah.
back out the water fountain or something. So I'm just old
You're the
school
most
with it.
unpopular dude at the gym now.
Yeah, I just swallow the carbohydrate drink, but I think that also could have some potential benefits. I've seen a little bit of elevation in insulin levels, not tremendous by any means, but that's an anti-catabolic hormone. If I'm training, breaking down tissue, and I got a little bit more of an anti-catabolic, a hormone that's can help preserve my muscle, cool. And I can have a little bit more muscle protection. I can have a little bit of benefit of performance increase. And again, this is only for those who are training at or above outside of their comfort zone. But I think that can both of those factors can definitely be advantageous in the long run.
Yeah, I've tracked this for probably like the last 2 years of in general, I found if the session's over about an hour, if I have some form of carbohydrate during, I tend to perform a little bit better during the session, but I've noticed my heart rate variability the next day is usually better. And that if I would really push all my training sessions, my recovery was better where I could almost get like another day of training in at the same level, which I thought was curious. And people usually then freak out and they're like, "Oh, more carbohydrates. What are you doing?" I'm like, "You're looking at what, maybe 30 grams of carbohydrates or something." I usually use 30 to 40. So it's not that high. You're looking at 120 calories, a little bit more. So I think people, I don't know, I think they still get stuck in this, oh, training has to be fat burning mode only, and you're putting carbohydrates in, and you're blunting fat burning. I'm like, I don't care about acute fat burning during a resistance training session. Shit, I want to use glucose as much as possible because I want the performance benefit from it. I want that to drive the adaptations. And if I can consume a few more carbohydrates, and even if I want to stay eucaloric and skip I don't know, half a cookie at night, I think that's a good trade off.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And me personally, I consume about 650 grams of carbs a day. My intra-workout carbs, they're not very high. I personally only do about 15, 10 to 15.
Oh, that's pretty
But
low.
yeah, do whatever you can tolerate. So if some people can tolerate more, and I think that's great, but some people might tolerate less. But either or, for lifters, I think pushing the edge of those bounds, that they can be highly effective, those carbohydrates. And then also, I was going to say something, but I was going to add to that.
You'll think of it. We talked about muscle damage too, and you mentioned that you're not a fan of a lot of muscle damage, which you may want to explain a little bit more because I think that might have gotten glossed over by a lot of people. And then the use of intra carbohydrates may, and this is all theoretical, I haven't seen any published data, decrease overall cortisol levels. And do you think cortisol is a real muscle munching hormone where if we can keep cortisol within reason lower post training, we're going to be better? Obviously, we want some of it during training because we want cortisol to release energy. We want the performance benefit. But then afterwards, if you're just chilling out doing whatever, you don't need this massive amount of energy. So do you think there's a role for carbohydrates intra and post to potentially modify cortisol levels? Or do you think that it's so far down in the weeds for most people, it just doesn't matter?
I think that people overplay cortisol.
Yes.
Acute temporary releases of cortisol are good, are healthy. They're indicative your body is working, you're physiologically operating how you should. Chronically elevated cortisol long term, that can be bad. That can be associated with some potential impaired sleep, some potential insulin resistance, the munchies, the food cravings. Cortisol is also pretty interesting. That can alter where your body fat is distributed. If you have a longer chronically elevated cortisol, you might store a little bit more fat around your midsection. So chronically elevated cortisol is not good, but chronically elevated cortisol wouldn't be caused by resistance training, an acute bout of exercise. Chronically elevated cortisol might be caused by extreme dietary restriction or extreme overexercise. And this brings me to the point that I remember now from the previous portion. People, I agree 1,000% with you. When you're weight training, don't try to burn fat. You got 18 hours a day. If you have a huge sandwich 6-hour sort of window, pre and post workout or during your workout, you can slam a lot of carbs. You want to burn carbs in that area. That would be indicative that you could train at a high intensity. You could train close to your maximum effort. You got 18 hours a day to burn all that fat or more if you want to have a smaller window of carbohydrate feeding. But when you're training, when you're weightlifting, maybe aerobic exercise could be different, but when you're weightlifting, take pride in pushing intensity and burning carbohydrates and worry about the fat burning aspect later. But your pre-workout, your intra-workout, and your immediate post-workout, don't worry about fat burning, worry about maximizing muscle accretion. And if the leanest athletes, the leanest people in the world, they're physique athletes and they're slamming carbohydrates. They're not really worried about fat burning. They're building muscle, and that muscle is going to be the later engine to burn a lot of fat. So I think that's super important. But jumping back on the cortisol train, people overplay. Cortisol is not your enemy. Cortisol is your friend. It's a hormone that it can be an enemy if it's chronically elevated, but cortisol in acute settings is just indicative that your body's working exactly how it should. Your blood pressure is going to be good. You're releasing potentially the stored nutrients. You're breaking out some of those stored nutrients. It helps other hormones do what they need to do. And it's indicative of a carbohydrate burning that could be occurring.
Yeah, I think it was it was the late 80s. Bodybuilders played around with drugs to try to block all cortisol because they were convinced that it was bad and evil. And oof, it didn't go well. Like the handful of like anecdotal reports were, I feel like crap all the time. I can't figure out why. And you're like, yeah, because you don't have one of the main hormones that's designed to release energy. And then if you have any major trauma that happens, you get in a car accident or anything like that, where you've got this massive stressor that gets dumped on your body, you potentially could die. Like you're in a world of hurt if you blunt that to zero levels chemically. And of course, it didn't help their physique at all. And hopefully that practice went away as fast as it showed up. But it just illustrates how people think, oh, this is the single factor. We're going to modify this thing and we're not going to try to turn the dial a little bit. We're just going to crush it entirely to zero. And yeah, that rarely is that going to be a good idea.
I'd almost say that cortisol, I'm sure we've heard of like the insulin hypothesis and, oh, insulin makes you overweight, insulin makes you obese. It's almost like the analogous one, not for the diet, but for the training is cortisol. Oh, cortisol is the root of all evil. No, it's not. It's okay. It's a hormone that ensures that you can operate healthy and then you can change your physique how you want to change it.
Yeah. And obviously, I'm biased towards metabolic flexibility, right? So if you're training, you want the ability to push carbohydrate metabolism as high as possible. You want to run a shit ton of things through PDH enzyme, glycolysis, all that stuff, because that's all performance based that allows you to get the adaptations you want. And then once you're done with that, you maybe you're doing some low intensity cardio, which is a whole nother debate, but just hanging out the rest of your day, you want the ability to use mostly fat as a fuel. Like you don't need this high rate of ATP, and you want the ability to switch back and forth so that in theory you have a better capacity to regulate body composition. You may be able to do periods of fasting. I usually find that those people tend to respond better to caloric restriction a little bit. They don't tend to feel quite as horrible per se, because yes, at the end of the day, calories still matter. I get it. But you're still trying to optimize or get better performance and body comp at the same time, which is going to be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, I agree. I'm personally just my story. I'm eating over 600 grams of carbs a day, and I hold abs year round. And
Oh,
what allows
crazy
me
person.
what allows me to do this is the metabolic flexibility. People, they talk about protein spacing and protein timing. I think carbohydrate timing, and so maybe we call it carbohydrate spacing, whatever, is equally as important. I talked about earlier, maybe you have an 18-hour window to burn fat, but around that workout, you want to slam those carbohydrates. In your lecture, I was a student of yours about
That's
4 years
right.
ago
Yeah.
in Dr.
2018.
Ormsby's his sport nutrition class, and you turned me on to this, and it forever
Oh,
changed my life.
oh,
So why I can eat 600 grams of carbs and hold abs year round is because of your advice and what you did. The timing of your carbohydrates, in particular, your post workout. And if we combine different elements of research, we combine the fact that you're hypersensitive to taking glucose into your muscles post workout. We combine the fact, sort of Felipe Damas's research, that the sort of protein synthesis, the ability to maximize growth is highest in advanced athletes about the first 6 hours after you lift. We have a perfect marriage between the ability to uptake this glucose and the ability to grow. And growth does depend on amino acids, but it also depends on energy. And typically, if you're eating a high protein diet, the energy restriction, the lack of available fuel, that's why growth is stopped. So if we combine all this research and we look at metabolic flexibility, having a good workout, intra-workout carbs, and having some protein and carbohydrates after, especially a healthy amount of carbohydrates after. I'm a fan of backloading those carbs post-workout to an extent. That is such a great anabolic recipe to get those nutrients in your muscle and then get growing. And then once you store that muscle glycogen, you're not releasing that muscle glycogen. You can essentially gradually get back into fat burning mode once you reduce those carbohydrates. But that timer on your workout, pre-workout, your intra-workout, your immediate post-workout, especially the first 4 to 6 hours ish, don't be shy on those carbs. They're great. So growth is not linear throughout the day, meaning you're not going to be equally as sensitive to growth throughout all times of the day. And nor should your carbohydrate intake be linear throughout the day, in my opinion. If you want to maximize your physique, you should take advantage of that metabolic flexibility and timing those carbohydrates.
yeah. In a perfect world, that's how I set up templates for athletes. And again, some of my clients are listening going, well, I don't follow this template because, as we discussed earlier, there's a whole bunch of other factors. Like you have to have all your other big rocks in place. But in a perfect world, which no one lives in, I like having them train like mid-afternoon. If you can have a flexible schedule, for me, this works better. This is my own bias because I just feel better then. But 1 to 3 in the afternoon, you're up long enough, you're awake, you got some work done, you get a nice break from whatever you were doing. And I know not everyone can control their schedule, but you can have some carbohydrates a little bit before, during, and then you've got this huge window after to have a fair amount of carbohydrates. You could debate how you want to have dinner because it's going to be so many hours removed from that. And then the next day, you could have a few less carbohydrates, and maybe you're doing an aerobic day. So for a lot of those people, have carbs will be a little bit lower. And then the next day, they're going to be high again. Because like you said, if you stored them in muscle glycogen, the thing that depletes carbohydrates from muscle is primarily muscular work. So if you're not doing a ton of muscular work, like yes, go walk, don't be a sea slug, whatever, but you're not doing another high intensity, heavy session, your muscle glycogen's really not going anywhere. They've done biopsies, I think, after 48-hour fast, and you still have plenty of muscle glycogen, unless you were doing training. If you're doing exhaustive endurance training, then yeah, it's going to be lower. But I think people forget that. They're good about thinking about the storage mechanisms for fat, but we sometimes forget that you can store a lot of carbohydrates just as muscle glycogen. And obviously, you've got some as liver glycogen too, which does fluctuate a lot more.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I think there was a new paper, it was not in 2018, and they called it like the metabolic switch, and it was all about depleting liver glycogen. And when you
Yeah.
deplete liver glycogen, that's when essentially you can get into fat burning mode. And that does depend on your activity. And I think they looked at it how quickly you can deplete liver glycogen, depending where you started from. It's between 9 and 36 hours to get in essentially fat burning mode. So I think one of the best things that you could do is backload those carbohydrates. And if you do want to lose some weight, then you drop carbs real low and you kind of got to wait it out. And I know it sucks to be low carb for a while, but then you really can get into a really great fat burning mode 9, 10, 12 hours later. And then you're just living in that fat burning mode. And that's how you can rapidly burn body fat. So the trick to, in my opinion, to rapidly change your physique, to rapidly burn fat is knowing and understanding carbohydrate timing and using metabolic flexibility to your advantage. And I've seen it in my physique and my clients' physique. And I think it's such an underappreciated element that we can use to manipulate and change our physiques. And I know there was one study, I think it was by Louise Burke, and it doesn't get the attention, but they used metabolic flexibility. They equated calories, and one group did lose more body fat because they used the nutrient timing and they essentially did get in that fat burning mode. But it's not really talked about in the nutrition realms because I think they were looking at like exercise performance and aerobic training. So it just gets glossed over by a bunch of physique athletes like, endurance training, I don't want to read the title of that. But if you look at the little step findings, huge implications.
Yeah, I think that might be the Marquette one,
Yeah, yeah,
2016. Was in
yeah.
Med Sci. And what they did is they did this train high, train low. They were playing around with different levels of muscle glycogen as a simple over thing. But yeah, they had the exact same macronutrients. They had one group do more of a timing approach, the other group did not. And it was endurance athletes. I think they used 3 markers. I talked about it in the Flex Diet Cert. And what was crazy is like super well controlled study, high level lab, high level publication. It wasn't like a bunch of hosers like putting it in We Publish Anything peer reviewed journal. It was pretty legit stuff. And they showed, I think it was like a 2 or 3% body comp change in 6 or 8 weeks. It was not something where you're like, there's something going on there. It wasn't like, oh, 0.5%, air indexa, whatever. Another group tried to replicate that study, but they didn't use the exact same design and they didn't find the same result, which again, you could argue wasn't maybe the same design, different population, whatever. But to me, like you said, that is like super fascinating. And the template I've used for forever is like your weight training days, like just have a lot of carbohydrates. Your aerobic days, maybe a little less. And if you really want to try to maximize muscle gain, but you want to try to maybe get a little bit leaner or stay on the leaner side, I just incorporate a longer day of fasting, 1 day per week. Do your aerobic training that day. You're probably going to get into a lot higher use of fat as fuel. You cut out 1 day's worth of calories, but then you don't have any issue coming back the next day. And I've had athletes literally hit 500 grams of carbohydrates the next day with no issue at all. Because the PDH enzyme doesn't downregulate. You don't have any issues if you're trying to do a keto day or cycle in and out of a ketogenic diet. And I think just that flexibility of being able to go hard transition from, yeah, my fasting day is not necessarily my performance day, but it's only 1 day out of the week. It was enough. It was a carbohydrate, low carb day anyway. So I'll just cut out calories that day. And most people could still train heavy 3-4 days a week. And so for people who want that kind of in between, because a lot of people are like, I want to add muscle and get leaner. So if you really want to get leaner, you need to do like physique athletes and just pick a time period and cut your calories. Or if you really want to gain a lot of mass, have an off season, eat 650, 700 grams of carbs, work your way up. But for some people, they want that kind of in between. And that's just what I found is the best solution to live in both worlds.
I'd personally definitely want that in between. And I think that sort of that slower progress is better than the dirty bulks.
The dirty bulk.
The physique athlete trying to gain some muscle. Cause I remember those when I was in college.
Elite
It was
Priest
like
off season.
Tuesday or Thursday, they had 2 pizzas at Domino's, large $6.99, and I was hitting both of them up. And that leads to yo-yo dieting. So I think the extremes at either end, and regardless of your population, if you're brand new to doing this or you've been doing it for forever, the huge calorie intakes and then the huge crash diet cuts, I don't think those are optimal. I think implementing metabolic flexibility and manipulating your carbs throughout the day, potentially throughout multiple days, if you're training and resting, I think that's the way to go, regardless of your population and who you are. I think those steady progress, that's your best bet as opposed to the yo-yo dieting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you also have the benefit of increasing health at the same time, right? Because that's a whole separate podcast of people who just throw their health in the trash bin and don't worry about it. And I get at some level, if you're an elite of the elite, you're probably not going to have the best health markers. There's been multiple case reports of natural, not natural competitors around the day of their contest, and shit just gets wacky. But you're living in a temporary state. You're not going to spend the rest of your life staying stage lean either. So yeah, I agree with that. Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for your time today. That's been super, super helpful. How can people find more about you?
Yeah, just go to my Instagram, Dr. Soko. It's Dr_SOKO. And I also have an app coming out, hopefully in August. So just stay tuned for that. Dr. Soko on Instagram. I post a lot of non-biased research studies. And my goal is essentially, I am an athlete myself, and I want everyone to just feel what I feel, which is kind of confidence when you do look in the mirror, because I know just how frustrating and dejecting it can be when you look in the mirror and you're not confident in your physique or you're stuck on a plateau. And my goal is for nobody to experience that feeling.
Awesome. And you obviously work with clients. Do you have any openings or people still?
I have a website, link in bio, scienceofsculpture.com, or you can just shoot me a message and we can discuss whatever type of coaching you want. There's ability to sign up on the website, sign up for coaching on the website. Any way you can contact me, I'm always open. Instagram is the gateway to set up further conversations.
Awesome. But yeah, I would definitely check out your Instagram stuff. It's really good. I like your little cute dog pics in there too, which is great.
Need a dog pic to chase the science.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I put, I don't know how many memes in the Flex Diet shirt just because you can only have so many graphs. I would do all the scientific graphs and then I forced myself to take out a third of them and just put memes in their place, and it worked much better. Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Really appreciate it. Big thanks to Chester. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you so much for your very kind words there. As you guys heard in the podcast, I did a lecture for Dr. Mike Ormsby back in, 2018, and yeah, Chester was one of the students there, so he said some very nice things about me, so thank you so much for that. Really appreciate all the work that he's done. Shout out also to Dr. Mike Ormsby, who's been on the podcast here before. He has one of the interviews actually in the Flex Diet certification. So if you want to learn more about flexible dieting and metabolic flexibility for performance and body composition, check out the Flex Diet. Just Flex Diet, FLEXDIET.com. And you'll be able to get onto the waitlist the next time that it opens. Probably not for a little while, but it might be soon, depending upon if you're listening to this podcast later. Put your name on the waitlist. You'll be able to get all of the information there on the free newsletter, and you'll be notified once the Flex Diet is open. I usually have some special bonus items only for people on the newsletter. So thank you very much, Dr. Chester Soko. Really appreciate it. As I said in the intro, go to Instagram, give him some love. He'll be tagged below here, and it'd be cool to see him get over 10,000 followers. He's getting pretty close. So go there on the Instagram. It's Dr_SOKO. Thank you all so much for listening. Greatly appreciate it. We will talk to you all very soon.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good,
It
though.
could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!